Hello and welcome everybody to today's webinar, Protect Your Microsoft M365 and Cloud Environments. Just a quick start on the overview of what we'll be covering today. First of all, I'll introduce myself and our speakers. Then I'll give you a high-level overview of who we are here at Modality. Then we'll talk briefly about the new normal we're living in, discuss the benefits and challenges of the ever-shifting world. Then obviously pass you over to the expert speakers who will be providing you with a bit more of a detailed insight and knowledge around the protection of your M365 environments. And through using M365's secure by design approach and the applications within M365, but also looking at how third-party applications can help with data management and disaster recovery. If you have any questions as we're going through the session, obviously do feel free to pop any questions into the chat and we'll make every effort to get the experts to answer the questions as we go along. Alternatively, we'll have some time at the end of the session to go through any questions we've missed or if anyone's got any questions at the end. So without further ado, my name is Gordon Edwards. I'm an account executive here at Modality Systems. Been here throughout the entire pandemic and helping organizations to evolve their Microsoft technologies to help to adapt to this new normal. And today I'm being supported by Modality's own principal solutions architect and our Microsoft security specialist, Jamie Wielden, and also our M365 backup partner, Redstor, today being represented by our channel manager, Harpel Shima. So who is Modality? So back in the origins, back in 2007, Modality Systems has always been a Microsoft-centric partner, originating back in the UC space, working with OCS and the likes of Link, but evolving through Skype for Business and Microsoft Teams. Now, obviously, with Teams being the window to the working world and touching on the entire M365 stack, Modality have evolved to become an end-to-end service provider for the whole of Microsoft Workplace. Today, Microsoft and Modality are the world's largest Microsoft Teams dedicated practice, and has over 11 Microsoft Gold competencies and 5 Microsoft Partner of the Year awards. We're also in the 1% of global partners who are eligible to offer fast-track support to our customers on Microsoft's behalf and are able to deliver the Microsoft-approved M365 Accelerator workshops. Modality provide a range of Microsoft solutions that enable organizations to drive that modern workplace success with a focus on the Microsoft Secure by Design approach. So the new normal is here. Over the last 12 months, there's been a huge shift towards the more flexible cloud-based and data storage applications within the workplace. As well as the introduction of these new technologies, the very way people work has changed. Employees no longer expect to access their data solely from the office or on company-owned devices. The world of remote working has now begun. Data and business applications are essentially the backbone of any organization, and the journey to the cloud has forced many companies to face difficult decisions when it comes to their IT security and compliance. Moving from a more traditional on-premise legacy system towards the cloud can be very daunting, with many organizations obviously wanting to ensure the migrations run smoothly and that their data is backed up, protected, and aligned with any regulatory compliance obligations. Obviously, with data and information being key to any operational and commercial success, this in itself has a huge increase in the number of cyber criminal activity that's taking place. And the traditional security approach is actually failing us. The old school castle approach, as I call it, of hardened perimeter, protecting all of that data within the firewall, may have worked in the past. However, it isn't enough within the new normal. We found that these siloed on-premise tools and data sets lack the visibility and automation, and therefore have not kept up with the changing world and its risks. Because of this, obviously the number of data and security breaches and the commercial impact of these breaches is increasing every single year. On top of this, governments are also trying to keep up, and with regulatory rules constantly changing and the cost of not remaining compliant also increasing, especially with over 750 regulatory bodies around the world releasing more than 200 updates per day, managing your organization's compliance isn't easy. And since you can't be compliant without first being secure, it all starts with security. So with all these potential hurdles on the journey to cloud, why are people looking to move to these cloud-based technologies? Well, obviously, there are huge advantages to moving to the cloud. Obviously, primarily the reduction of data center footprint and the management costs, reduction of outsourced IT, consolidating organizations' environments to that single pane of glass that's easily managed, driving online sales through cloud-based applications and solutions, as well as improving IT application management. Essentially, being more flexible and dynamic and offering faster deployments and keeping organizations agile, being able to evolve with the current trends and stay ahead of any new trends that are coming down the line. So what are the current challenges of maintaining a secure cloud environment? Based on a survey of over 300 CIOs and senior IT decision makers, the three most reported cloud security threats were due to 1, misconfiguration of those environments, 2, a lack of visibility to access, and 3, poor identity and access management. As IT security is ever evolving and dynamic environments, 66% of these CIOs admitted to having the insufficient expertise to maintain and manage those environments alongside all of the other IT work streams and responsibilities. What was probably the most worrying statistic that came from this survey was actually 79% of all companies had experienced a data breach in the last 18 months, with 43% stating that they had experienced at least 10 or more attacks in that period. It doesn't have to be this way. So that's enough for me. I'd like to pass you over to our expert, Jane Wielden. She's going to talk you through a bit about how to protect your M365 environment.
Fantastic. Thanks, Gordon. Can you just give me control? Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. So Gordon's given a really good overview there of some of the benefits of moving to cloud, but also some of the security challenges that we've got in that environment, particularly around things like misconfiguration of environments and insufficient expertise within the new cloud world. And a lot of that is due to the changing nature of the security tools and the security methodology that organizations need to adapt to cope with the fact that all of a sudden, rather than their data being in nice, secure private data centers, it's all out there on the internet, easily accessible from a multitude of different networks and a multitude of different devices. So how do we adapt? How do we change our security philosophies to acknowledge that change in architecture? So the key principle that I like to talk to lots of customers about is this philosophy adopting a zero trust outlook. So this is really important when all of a sudden all of our identities are in the cloud, all of our data, all of our applications are in the cloud, and there's public access to those tools and those platforms. So zero trust is about maintaining a number of different approaches. The first one is making sure that you're verifying explicitly who is accessing your data, your applications, and your infrastructure. Now, obviously, that's not just username and password authentication. It also includes things like multi-factor authentication as well. But more importantly, it's also based on a number of other data points around that access. So we can look at not only who the user is, have they provided a multi-factor authentication token, but we can also look at what device are they coming from, what geography are they in, are they coming from an unsecured public network or a private corporate LAN? Have they got the right security controls in place on those devices? So are those devices compliant? Is it a corporately owned asset or is it a bring your own device? We can use all of those data points to verify that access and make sure that that user on that network with that device is accessing only the information and controls that it needs to. So this is really important. The second principle of zero trust is adopting that least privileged access methodology. So previously, administrators, system admins would have had God level accounts within their environments. And this was all fine because, as Gordon's explained, they're inside the castle walls. You've got dedicated data centers with secure physical access, firewalls at the perimeter network, and all connectivity is coming from secure internal local area networks. That's no longer the case, obviously, when we're in the cloud. So if you've got those highly permissioned administrative accounts, if one of those accounts is compromised, then people can log in with that account from any network on the planet. So it's always worth adopting a least privileged access methodology, and this requires using tools like privileged identity management to make sure that users are only granted access at the point that they need them. So we're talking about just-in-time permissioning structures here. The third principle around zero trust, and probably the most important one, is to assume a breach mentality. So this is that mental outlook of assuming that you've either already been breached or that there's someone out there who's actively trying to breach you at any point in time. Once you accept that you're in that position, that means that your outlook to how you deliver security services changes. Rather than securing the perimeter and then sitting back and waiting for something to happen, you're much more proactive. You're out there, you're looking at vulnerabilities, you're going through security logs, you're threat hunting, you're trending behavior, you're running advanced security analytics across your environment to constantly try and detect what's happening, where is it happening, what's a likely breach, so that you're on the proactive front foot in terms of identifying that, so that you can proactively shut it down, protect it, and make sure that your security footprint and your exposure is as minimal as possible. So this is very much the philosophy of best practice in the cloud world, that zero trust approach. So there are a number of different areas of the security environment that we need to apply those philosophies to. The first, obviously, is identity and access management. So knowing who's authenticated against your environment and controlling how and where they're allowed to authenticate. Secondly, we've got threat protection. So these are your detection tools, so anti-malware, anti-phishing, and also some of the more advanced tools such as Cloud App Security, CASB products, to make sure that you're proactively being informed about those threats. The next two areas I'm going to spend most of my time talking about today. So we've got information protection. So in terms of being able to identify your data, where it is, how it's being used, how it's being stored, who's sharing it, but probably most importantly, what sensitivity level is it? So if you know what your most business critical data is, and you're able to identify that, then you can wrap relevant controls and protections around it. The second area that we'll discuss today is security management. So in terms of maintaining that zero trust, what you really need is an end-to-end visibility across all of your environment, both your Microsoft environment, but also more importantly, your third-party technology environments as well, so that you're able to identify all of the behavior, run analytics, and know exactly what's happening across all of those platforms and all of those tools. So I'll spend a little bit of time talking about how we can deliver that with Microsoft as well. The final part of the puzzle in terms of areas of focus is your compliance solutions. So this is making sure that once you've identified your data, you know how it's being used appropriately, that people are applying your corporate compliance rules and regulations, and that you are treating that data appropriately. So if you have legal requirements to either retain or delete that data after certain periods of time, you have the systems in place that allow you to do that. So this is really a data lifecycle management and compliance assurance. So how do we deliver that with the Microsoft stack? Well, the great news is that there is a wealth of different tools and capabilities within the Microsoft product portfolio that allow us to deliver a really integrated solution across all of those different tools and capabilities. So today's session is very much focused on data protection and data management. So we're just going to focus on information protection and that end-to-end security management that you need for Zero Trust. But there are over 40, 50 different security tools within the Microsoft suite that cover the full gamut of capabilities here and offer a really integrated experience. So the data from all of those tools is commonly available across the Microsoft platform, giving you really good visibility across all of those different capabilities into exactly what's happening within your environment. And obviously a lot of those tools as well extend beyond the Microsoft boundary. So we can also look at security across your third-party platforms, whether that's on-premise or via other cloud service providers. And lastly, by using this Microsoft stack, you're able to make maximum use of the investment that you've made in the Microsoft licensing engine. So by leveraging as much of this built-in Microsoft capability as you can, you're making sure that your total cost of ownership is reduced because you're using an integrated set of tools within the Microsoft footprint that you've probably already licensed a significant proportion of. So this is considerably more cost effective than going to niche best in breed third-party providers that maybe will do one or two of these things, and you would have to invest in a suite of different tools to deliver the full capability. By leveraging what's in Microsoft and available within the Office 365 and Azure environments, you can reduce that cost significantly by delivering that from one consistently delivered set of tools. So moving on and starting to talk about specifically information protection. So there's some great tools within Microsoft to deliver this, but I wanted to take a little bit of time and talk through this best practice first and talk about the journey that you need to go on as a customer to deliver good information protection. So I think, as I mentioned already, the first place to start is making sure that you know what your data is. So what's sensitive, what's not, what can be shared externally, what is internal only, what's finance data, what needs to be retained for 5 years versus can be deleted straight away, what data is GDPR relevant. All of this information is really important. So you need to make sure you've got tools available to understand your data, what it is, what sensitivity is, and how it's being used. Once you've got that basic understanding, you can then look at how you're protecting that environment and protecting that data. So there are tools that you can put in place to enforce encryption, to restrict sharing or access to that data, and also to mark it as sensitive or critical or internal only. Once you've put those protections in place, there's then additional tools that you can leverage to help you prevent data loss. So these tools will help you identify users who are perhaps inadvertently sharing data that they shouldn't be, and either reach out to them and engage them and retrain them, or actively block them from doing those inappropriate actions with that data, whether that's emailing it out, putting it on external data sharing platforms, or any of the other different methods that we've got for sharing that data. So making sure you've got the capability to implement those controls is really important. Finally, the final piece of this puzzle is making sure that as an organization, you've got the right governance and life cycle management in place to be able to make sure that you're managing that data correctly. So that could be retaining it for a certain period of time. It could be making sure that it's only stored in locations that you've pre-certified for that sensitivity of data. And it's also making sure that data that you identify as a formal business record has the right controls and capabilities locked around it. So having those data governance tools is also really, really important. So how do we do this within the Microsoft world? Well, looking first at that ability to understand your data, Microsoft have a number of tools around data classification that we can apply across the entire M365 world. So specifically, data classification labels allow us to apply customer specified labels against their various different document types and data types. So these are labels that you can create specifically to your own internal business structure and business logic, and get these labels applied to your documents. So this allows you to identify what data is public, private, internal only, customer data, or really sensitive private data that can't be shared anywhere. So you're able to apply these labels to that document. These labels can be applied manually by the users at time of creation, but we can also leverage trainable classifiers. So this is predefined rules within the 365 environment that allow you to intelligently identify documents of a certain type. So we can use regular expressions and keywords to identify certain documents as a particular sensitivity or retention label, but we can also use trainable content. So if you've got a number of customer contracts already, you can use those documents as examples to train the Microsoft engine what a customer contract looks like specifically to your organization. So that means that you don't have to work out complicated regular expressions or keyword analysis. You can let the documents itself train the Microsoft engine into what the different sensitivity labels need to be applied to. And this leverages Microsoft's machine learning capability in the cloud, which is a massive capability at scale. So it allows you to do really, really accurate training for those different data types. Once you've got those documents identified, you can then automatically encrypt the most sensitive data. So quite simply, we're already able to wrap controls around those sensitive pieces of information. Those controls extend even further when we start talking about data loss prevention, or DLP. So we're able to apply specific DLP rules to data of certain types for certain users. So we can create granular rules within the M365 platform that says only these types of users are able to access this data, or this group of users are the only ones that are able to share this data externally. These documents can or can't be printed. External email is not allowed. We can apply all of those controls. And it's a really, really granular permissioning capability here, where we can create fairly complicated bespoke policies that are specific to your organization to help prevent that accidental sharing of sensitive data. There's two ways that we can deploy that. We can deploy that as in a proactive control that actually prevents that sharing, where the user is actually restricted from engaging in that behavior as per the policy. More typically, more and more organizations these days are deploying that in a reporting and alerting only mode. So you build the same rules and the same policies, but rather than actively blocking the user from sharing that data, it will generate an alert that goes to an administration team, who will then reach out to the user, maybe query what they've been doing, how they've been doing it, and then offer them some internal training material. So both of those models are appropriate to different organizations. Obviously, the most security conscious organizations will want to actively stop users from engaging in sharing data that they shouldn't be sharing. The more moderate organizations will often have concerns about impacting business from limiting users from doing things that may be necessary. So will often prefer to implement a report or an alert only model. The great thing with the Microsoft stack is that we have the flexibility to support both options, as well as the flexibility to build really specific granular policies. So we can apply those differently to different sections of the community as well. And that can be applied to different sets of data, different users, different departments with different actions and restrictions. So again, really, really flexible. We can also build workflow around that so that those DLP issues can be approved, sanctioned. So again, this makes sure that we're minimizing the impact on IT departments by building business workflows. So if you've got a user that's trying to share a customer contract externally, we can build an automated workflow around that so that business owners and business managers are able to approve that or deny that that external sharing capability without needing to involve IT. So we're putting the onus back onto the business for managing this, because ultimately the business are the people that understand the data better than anybody else. And of course, sitting behind this, there's a wealth of alerting and reporting capabilities that sit within the administration portal, where you can look at how the platform's working, what matches you're hitting, what different content is being shared by who, and allow you to adjust and adapt those DLP policies over time to better reflect usage and need within the business. So fantastic levels of control there for managing and making sure that you're in control of your data and understand how that's being used. So moving on now to how we get that end-to-end view of the world and ensure that we're able to properly implement that zero touch or zero trust methodology. Microsoft have Azure Sentinel. So Azure Sentinel is a cloud native SIEM. So SIEM is a security incident and event management platform. So this allows you to collect all of your security event logging data from all of your different platforms, both your Microsoft cloud platforms and Azure and M365, your on-premise environment, but also all of your third-party tools, whether that's Cisco firewalls, Zscaler proxies, third-party cloud platforms. We can bring all of that security event data into Sentinel as a single portal, and then leverage the power within the Microsoft cloud to run deep dive analytics across that data so that you can understand and trend and spot behaviors and patterns and issues across your environment. So we're able to visualize what's happening there, identify incidents and data, and get the most from all of that security capability. And because this is built in the Microsoft cloud, it's able to really leverage artificial intelligence and machine learning to massively reduce the noise and the workload and overhead on your internal security teams, so that they're able to just focus on the key critical incidents and events that are relevant to them, and not on the vast amount of noise that's being generated from all those systems that you're sucking that data in for. So huge amounts of power and capability there, and I'll talk a little bit about how that works in the next couple of slides. So how does Sentinel work, and what are its capabilities? So when we're looking at that end-to-end security management, we're really talking about 4 phases of activity. The first phase is collecting the data. Once we've got that data, we then move into a monitor and detect phase, where we're analyzing that data, looking for trends and patterns. Once we've identified an issue, We're then investigating and deep diving into the specifics of that problem. What's happened? What's the breach? Who was affected? What data has been compromised? And finally, we're responding to that issue in terms of implementing a fix, closing down the breach, and making sure that we're fully secure again. So Sentinel sits across all of these capabilities. So it will natively ingest all of that security event data from the Microsoft tools and platforms, but also from third-party providers. And it does this using any number of third-party connectors into those platforms. So there are native connectors for M365 and for Azure and for your on-premise Microsoft environment, but there's also an increasing collection of connectors for third-party products. So Cisco, Zscaler, checkpoint firewalls. Yeah, there's an increasing number. I think I was looking on the portal the other day, and there was over 120 different connectors, and Microsoft are telling me that there's 15, 16 new connectors being added every week at the moment. So there's a huge wealth of capability there for ingesting data from a whole range of different capabilities. Once we've got that data within the Sentinel platform, in terms of mining that information, we have a number of tools and capabilities that we can use within Sentinel to analyze that data. We've got pre-configured workbooks and dashboards that give you visualizations for key events and for information, allowing you to very quickly visualize trends in behavior and activity. We've got a whole bunch of native intelligence that Microsoft built into the Sentinel platform to make sure that they're proactively flagging the critical events for you. And there's a number of pre-baked analytics which you can leverage there. You've also got the capability of writing your own analytics to further refine that. And there's quite advanced hunting capabilities where you're able to hunt through that data, make notes, store information, run specific queries against that data set to proactively look for trends and behaviors in those patterns. In the investigation phase, we have a number of different incident management capabilities. So Sentinel can log tickets into any number of third-party incident management tools, but it also has the capability to flag incidents internally and build investigations and managements around those incidents, so you can remediate them, dismiss them, manage them, address them, etc. There's also the capability to automate resolutions. So we can build quite advanced playbooks that use Azure logic apps to automatically address any security issues that regularly are encountered. So a really good example of this is where you have impossible logon events. So these are events where users are logging into multiple geographies, without sufficient time for the user to travel between them. So maybe you see a logon in the UK, and then 15 minutes later, there's a logon attempt from China. So we're able to build automation playbooks around those events and any number of other events as well to remediate that or kick off a workflow in the background to manage that, again, reducing the overhead and the impact on security teams internally who otherwise would have to do all of that work manually themselves. So how does all of this work? So under the covers, because this is a native cloud platform, we're leveraging Microsoft's scale and breadth of exposure within their cloud environments. So Sentinel is able to take advantage of the billions and billions of events that Microsoft are seeing and detecting all of the time across their entire cloud stack. So all of these events, all of this behavior across all of their different customers globally, they will trend all of that data and they'll boil that down into a number of anomalous signals. So they'll look at all of those events, say, actually, what's anomalous here? What's strange? What's out of place? Those signals are then further refined into suspicious activity. And then those suspicious activity are further refined into high fidelity incidents, and these are the incidents that are surfaced within Sentinel for end customers to then action and remediate. So by using the scale of the cloud, by using Microsoft's artificial intelligence capability and machine learning capability, and the breadth and depth of exposure that they have across that Microsoft network, customers are able to make sure that they are, with Sentinel, able to focus on just those events that are relevant and are actually positive security issues that need feeding. So I hope that's given you a bit of a flavour of some of the capabilities that are available within the Microsoft toolset to make sure that you are proactively protecting your data, wrapping the right security controls around it, and proactively hunting for threats and issues and security events in your environment. So I'm now going to hand over to Harpal, who's going to talk about what happens if the worst happens and you do have some kind of data loss and you need to recover from that.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Jamie. Really appreciate it. And yeah, look, thank you everyone for joining us today and giving me the opportunity to present Redstor. Is your Office 365 data protected? Now, to introduce, my name's Harpal. I'm a senior account manager here at Redstor. I've been working at Redstor for just shy of 8 years now, and I've seen a lot of evolution and changes both within Redstor and also across our customer base and their requirement. I suppose, yeah, just to outline the objective of my presentation is really just to give you an overview on why it's important to protect data on the Office 365 platform, what Microsoft's role is with regard to the data, what your role is with regards to your responsibilities as an end user, and really where Modality and Redstor can help in terms of protecting you from those consequences of data loss and focusing on our key USPs. What makes the Redstor and Modality service different? And I don't like to focus on just backup. It's important to recognise that backup vendors, they all do the same thing. They back up the data in a fast and efficient manner, and we do it in a faster and more efficient manner when you're comparing it to an on-prem solution such as tapes. But the problem is, if you just focus on backups, it becomes very much a point of parity rather than a differentiator. Really, where I like to steer my conversations and where I see the most opportunities and the key differentiators is when we focus on the 20% that makes us different, that will add value to you, your team, and your business. Backup ultimately is very much a means to an end. No one buys backup to back up. Organizations invest in the Modality and Redstor service for the ability to access and recover their data. And one of our key USPs is very much around the speed of recovery. We developed a tool called Instant Data, which I'll touch on further, but it's the ability to stream your restores and also the Office 365 backups and simplicity, both technically and commercially. That's really where our greatest strengths lie and where we win when we're onboarding new customers. Those are the headline reasons that IT managers tend to highlight with regards to why they chose Redstor. Now, this is just some headline information about who we are, what we do, etc. High-level strapline, Redstor, we provide a next-generation cloud data management service that enables our customers to back up, recover, archive, and protect Office 365 all through a single control center. Importantly, Redstor, we're a vendor in our own right. We develop our own software. We support the infrastructure around it. We own the support. It's an end-to-end complete data management experience. We launched our service in 2005. We've got anywhere between 7 to 8 petabytes of data globally, and our clients, they range from top 100 accountancy firms, law firms. We've got 50-60% of the primary schools. We've got public sector organizations, charities, veterinary practices. One of the beautiful things about data is it's industry agnostic. Now, conscious, look, that there are a lot of services out there. You can go online and type in backup or Office 365 backup, and in the interest of being upfront, Redstor, we don't profess to be the cheapest, and it's important to recognize that we are more than just simply backup. It's an end-to-end data management service at a competitive price point. Where we compete, where we add value, is where our customers are looking to protect their data and looking for a provider that can provide the ability to recover the data at short notice. They're looking for a GDPR compliant data protection vendor, and importantly, they want to ensure that the data remains sovereign within UK and it's backed by a UK-based support team. Now on to the topic at hand. Why protect Office 365? Now in theory, look, Microsoft Cloud, it's a safe place. You can hold and store your data. You click a button, you save it somewhere in the cloud where you can access whenever you like. If you delete a file by mistake, you go onto the Microsoft support team. They've got a backup service somewhere with endless free storage, right? Now, just to be clear, this quote isn't something we've just put together. We've taken this straight out of the end user agreement, which organizations adhere to when they're signing up to Office 365. Microsoft explicitly state their responsibility is the uptime of the platform. And they suggest the data should be protected using a third-party application, a third-party service. And actually, you know what, I don't blame them. Because as I'll touch on, there's a couple of reasons why they would do such a thing. It's important also to be aware that 365 accounts, they're becoming increasingly vulnerable to malware attacks, prone to accidental deletion and data loss. Look, it can disrupt business activity. We're talking a breach of regulations and damaging reputations irreparably. Ultimately, the responsibility for data protection lies with the data owner. And that invariably leads to heads of ITs, IT managers asking, is Microsoft's native data protection enough? Interestingly enough, the adoption rate for Microsoft since COVID-19, 12, 13 months ago, has gone up by 700%. That in itself is increasing the strain and load on their platform and increasing the potential for downtime. By Microsoft's own admission, 80% of customers on the Office 365 platform do not protect their data outside of Microsoft. And when you're talking about OneDrive, SharePoint, applications that power much of the collaboration, that can all be put into jeopardy when you've got user error, hacking, you've got sync issues or malicious insiders causing data loss. Now, I'm just going to touch on some examples on what can potentially happen if you don't protect outside of Office 365. This is an interesting case. You can go onto Google again and type in Carlsbad Office 365 and you'll get this really interesting article. This particular employee unfortunately left on unacrimonious circumstances. He was working in California and he got laid off and he went back home to India. When he went back home, he actually decided, a bit bitter, but he decided to go onto the Carlsbad Office 365 platform and he deleted 1,200 of their 1,500 Office 365 accounts. And this caused for them somewhere in the region of £500,000 worth of damage in terms of revenue, downtime of 2 days. This particular gentleman didn't actually know there was an arrest warrant out for them because they found out what had happened and at the bottom of it that so-and-so is actually logged on, deleted the data. He actually thought a couple of months later, I believe, he went to his brother, go see his brother in New York, and he was actually arrested on landing in the US. And again, the fundamental is that that's 2 days of downtime, $500,000 worth of lost revenue that it cost that business. Here's another example. This particular one, we're not talking, 2-3 years ago. We're talking just a couple of months ago. This is taken straight out of a website. There's a mysterious bug going around deleting and moving stuff outside of SharePoint, moving stuff to the recycling bin, so to say. I actually had an organization contact me last summer. They were one of 3 customers globally who had all their data on Microsoft Streams actually deleted. And unfortunately, when he asked for the repercussions, legally, Microsoft turned around and said, right, look, well, we suggested you protected that data with a third party. And yeah, that was the driving force for him to go and protect the data outside of Microsoft. How secure is your data? In their defense, Microsoft, they do all they can to put safeguards in place so customers don't lose their data. But the bottom line is they don't specialize in data protection. Ultimately, you as a customer, you as a user are responsible for these activities. And the reason why they push the responsibilities back to you is very much when you look at the top 5 reasons for downtime historically. First is human error, software, malicious insiders, hackers, and lastly, viruses and malware. So it's no surprise that these are the areas Microsoft hand back to you to take responsibility, because it's outside of their scope. It's outside of their responsibility. They can't choose, who has access to what data. Their responsibility is the uptime of the platform. There's the age-old saying, I'm sure you've all heard, you don't put all your eggs in one basket. Organizations, they do not back up and store data in the same server room and where all the kit is. So it begs the question why IT professionals think it's okay to store data with Microsoft and let it be their responsibility. Now, Microsoft, they offer geo redundancy, but that's often mistaken for backup. The backup and recovery that Microsoft provides and what users assume they're getting often can be different. So aside from the standard precautions Office 365 has in place, you may need to reassess the level of control you have of your data and how much access you truly have to it. When you delete a user, whether you meant to or not, that deletion is replicated across the network, along with deletion of personal SharePoint, sites and OneDrive data. When data is deleted or corrupted, we're talking three major problems. Firstly is loss of data, secondly loss of time, and lastly loss of money. The most important part of a backup service is ultimately the restore process. Now, as I said, Microsoft provide exceptional availability. They can't be expected to focus elsewhere on things like extended retention or old user data. Being solely reliant on Microsoft support for help recovering lost data can be in some cases time consuming. Now, it's not possible to restore files in bulk when you're using standard tools in SharePoint. It's also important to note that for mail, it's not possible to perform a so-called point-in-time restore. The best way to avoid an impact and an issue impacting severely on business continuity is to find a third party, as they've already said, back it up with a third party, and that third party can offer a streaming on-demand access to your data at a moment's notice. Now, the idea of security threat brings in mind hackers and viruses, but I've already showed you an example. Businesses experience threats from inside as well, and they can happen, unfortunately, more often than you think. Organizations, they fall victim to threats posed by their very own employees, and in some cases, intentionally or unintentionally. Access to files and contacts, they change so quickly. It can be hard to keep an eye on, who you've installed the most trust to. Microsoft themselves, as I mentioned, they don't know. They have no way of knowing the difference between a regular user and a terminated employee attempting to delete critical data before they depart. In addition, unfortunately, some users unknowingly create threats by downloading infecting files, accidentally leaking usernames and passwords to sites that they thought they could trust. Another example is actually evidence tampering. Imagine employees strategically deleting incriminating emails or files, or keeping these objects outside the reach of legal or legal compliance or HR departments. Malware and viruses like ransomware, they've done serious damage to organizations across the globe. Now, not only are reputations at risk, but the privacy and security of internal and customer data as well. External data, they can sneak in through emails and attachment. It's not always enough just to educate users on what to look out for, especially when the infected messages are becoming so much more compelling. Exchange Online's limited backup and recovery functions are inadequate to handle serious attacks, and regular backups will help ensure a separate copy of your data is uninfected and you can recover quickly. It's an interesting slide. Microsoft itself, they don't view retention as data backup. And this is the most fundamental reason your company shouldn't just rely on Microsoft retention policies as the only means of backing up your Office 365 data. And I've had this in the past where, I've put the question to an IT manager and they've turned around and said, it's okay, I've got retention. The company itself, they view retention and data backup as two different sets of services. Now, actually, administering the retention policy, it can be complicated, it can be time consuming. Each solution, SharePoint, Exchange and OneDrive, they've got their own retention and deletion rules, all which require you to manually set the instruction. This means that you need to think through and maintain not one, but many different retention policies for various types of data that generates and maintains in Office 365. Now, I should note, retention, it only produces one version of data. If you want to keep multiple versions of the file, you should use versioning. And actually, one thing I wanted to lastly touch on, we've actually got a customer onboarding this month, and one of the main drivers for them to go on board was cyber insurance. They are unable to get sign-off for their cyber insurance unless they protect their data on Office 365 outside of Microsoft. And actually, that is we're finding is going to be something that we'll see more of, especially as ransomware becomes more prevalent, and it's more on the front pages rather than hidden away on IT subscriber or blogs or someone on Reddit. It's becoming front page on BBC News nowadays. Now, I hope the last couple of slides I've explained and provide context why it's important to protect your data. The next couple of slides, I just want to touch on really what Modality, what Redstor can do to help you in protecting that data. Firstly, we ensure that your organisation will comply with legal and compliance requirements to protect the data in Office 365, and importantly, we hold it in a secure encrypted format that's off-site. There's an air gap, it's outside your organisation's network. Next is simplicity. We ensure our service is simple to set up. There isn't a 2-week training course that's required. It's very much, an easy to use and manage solution that once it's set up, it's very much a set and forget. It doesn't require daily management. I've got some customers that only get a report when it's failed. Effectively, no news is good news. There's no hardware requirement. Redstor, we don't sell hardware. Our service is a true cloud solution, and it scales up as your business grows, or alternatively, if your business decides to sell off an arm or heaven forbid is forced to scale down, we amend your invoice. You only pay for what you consume rather than being committed up front to hardware with 3 or 5 year sweat out periods. With Redstor, you can recover your data back to Office 365, you can recover to on-prem, or you can recover to a hosted platform of your choice. You have the option to recover to where you want. Everything's audited. You know who's touched what. Deletion requires a 24-hour cooling off period and requires multiple 2 confirmations from 2 parties within the organisation. And you're not at the mercy of Microsoft or a third party with regards to your data. Going back to the analogy, your eggs are in separate baskets. You can do the restores actively whenever you want. You're not having to submit support tickets or wait for a third party to get back to you. Effectively, you're in full control of your data. We guarantee data sovereignty. Fundamentally, all the data remains in UK-based data centres. It's backed up to 2 UK-based data centres, so in multiple copies. Only the encryption key holders have access to the data. Now, one of our key USPs is the instant data feature, and I'm going to focus around the speed of recovery. All cloud backup solutions, you're only as good as the speed of the internet connection. With instant data, like Redstor's, you can actually stream like you do with Netflix, so you can stream your restores as well. And the last bit here is the final point where our service differs from the competition is the simplicity of the pricing model. A lot of our competition have got upfront hardware commitments, and they want to know how many users have you got. There'll be additional grey costs associated with egress charges when you're doing a restore. With Redstor, there's no upfront costs. We do not bill until data is on the platform. We operate a simple per terabyte model based on the data selected on your side rather than the amount of data in our data center, which can increase over time due to retention. So you could have 100 365 accounts using Mail, OneDrive and SharePoint, and they could accumulate to a terabyte, or you could have 10 users on Just Exchange that have a terabyte. The actual monthly investment is still the same. Now, this is a high-level overview of the Redstor architecture. We back up to 2 UK-based data centres. I had a question asked to me earlier last week, and the gentleman asked me as part of the setup, will this impact my network? Will this impact my users? Because we're backing up straight outside of Microsoft and that data is coming straight to our data center, it doesn't touch your organization's network. It goes straight from Microsoft into our data center. You put in your tenancy credentials, you select which users you want to protect or which files are within SharePoint under that user you want to protect, and it goes straight to our DC. You've got full capability to recover, whether you want to recover back locally, whether you want to recover back to Microsoft. It's entirely up to you. We've also developed a sizing tool, so you can put in your tenancy credentials, see exactly how much data you've got across these 3 applications, and then decide, right, I've got 500 gig on OneDrive, 300 gig on Mail, another 100 gig on SharePoint. Here's a price for a terabyte, so to say. Everything is managed through the Cloud Console. You've got full access to that, and you can decide, and as I mentioned, you can select how granular, or you can decide I want to back up everything across the tenancy. And then through the management console, you can see exactly how much data am I protecting across the entire tenancy, across all my users. Now, we always use the analogy of Netflix because, look, everyone knows it. They know how it works. I suppose the question is, do you think people would use Netflix if they had to download it for every film or series before you find the one that you want to actually watch? The point with instant data and Redstor is forget the backup. That's easy. Focus on the recovery, focus on the speed, and focus on the simplicity. And this is a great example where what you can do is actually, where you're talking a terabyte of data over a 10 meg line, you're still talking about a recovery time of 10 days. Whereas with Redstor, you're leveraging instant data. You can shave 9 days, 23 hours off that recovery process by being able to access that data immediately. With instant data, not only can you recover, you can also access the data by mounting it on a machine. You're effectively presenting a ghost of the machine without having it to fully recover, having all that data back. And this is a great example. You start that recovery process, you start that traditional 1 to 100% approach. Mr. User here decides, you know what, I need access to, file F, for example. It will immediately prioritize the data Mr. User needs rather than having to wait for all the data to get back. And the example I always like to, use is right now to get back to work. If it all, went belly up, to get back to work, all I need is Teams and this PowerPoint presentation. I don't need mail. I don't need Google Chrome in the background right now to get back to work and get back to, making money for my business. All I need is this PowerPoint presentation, the ability to run Teams. So again, going back to the example, if I can get you the data back you need right now, rather than having to wait for all the data back, it means you're back up and running significantly faster. Last slide is I'm always keen to emphasize support. When customers on board, it's a bit of a warm, fuzzy feeling. They're happy, they feel a sense of reassurance. I often find the real value in the service is when it's hit the fan and you need to get your data back. For P1 issues, we have 15 minutes response times, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. All of this is incorporated within the price per gig approach. And that very much is the slideshow complete, so to say. Before I hand back to Gordon, I'm always keen to emphasize if you like what you see, if there's an appetite to look at this further, Modality Account Manager is more than happy to get you an idea with regards to indicative investments. Assuming investments are agreeable, we encourage all our prospects before committing to anything, trial it, test it. I did a similar webinar with another partner last year. We had an end customer actually decide use the Office 365 sizing tool. They saw they had 2 terabytes on the platform. They decided, you know what, actually let's trial it. As part of the trial, they realized we could back up their on-prem machines as well. 2 weeks into the trial, they weren't just backing up 2 terabytes, they were backing up 7 terabytes and ready to sign an order. So again, there's no limitations on the trial. We run the trial for 2 to 4 weeks. And if you decide at the end of the trial it's not ticking your boxes, we just shake hands and get confirmation we can go ahead and delete your data. Thank you very much for your time. Over to you, Gordon.
Thank you very much, Harpal. It's been really informative. Just looked on the feed here. Doesn't look like we've got any questions. If anyone's got any questions, do you want to just post them in the chat now? Not a problem. Well, if anyone does have any questions following this, we will be circulating a recording of the session to everyone who signed up. You can obviously respond to that email with any questions you have there. In the meantime, everyone enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Cheers.